As we get started, what I'd like to do is ask everybody to say hello in the chat feature. If you type your name and where you are listening from and say hi, this is just to make sure that we are all on the same wavelength and that our technology is working. So if you would just go ahead and say hello, that'd be great. The other thing I want to remind everybody is that this chat feature is your way of communicating with us. And so if you've got any questions, or especially those of you who are old veterans of the conference scene, if you've got any tips or hacks or anything that you've got to offer, throw them in there so that we can talk about it. This is supposed to be a very interactive kind of a thing. So it looks like we've got some folks saying hello. Hello, Liz. I haven't talked to you in a while. And so I guess people are hearing us. Marieke, how you been?
I'm good, Dan. Thanks for asking. Yeah. Happy Halloween, everyone. I wonder if you could tell us what your costume is today. Feel free to throw that in the chat. Get a head full here. Dan, are you wearing a costume?
I am wearing my executive director of a museum association costume. However, Scarlett and Meg both dressed up, and we just tweeted that. So if you want to see them in costume, Meg is Rey from Star Wars, and Scarlett is Flapper. So they're adding something to it. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Are we going to see that on Instagram? I want to see the photos.
I don't know. It's being tweeted right now. So.
Cool.
So, Marieke, we're here to talk about the conference, and I got to tell you, I am very excited about this upcoming NEMA 100th conference. You're going to be there, right?
Of course, wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff this year planned, and centering around the 100th anniversary, which is sort of a big deal.
This is our kickoff to the 100th anniversary, so we'll be celebrating with NEMA all year long.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you know this or not, Marieke, but I discovered who the founder of NEMA actually is. We found our own creation myth.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been reading the email, so she sounds like she was a remarkable woman.
Yeah, and the thing that I explored her a little bit. So she was that is Delia Isabel Griffin, the founder of NEMA, and she was the one that called together this group of museum professionals at the Hotel Westminster back in 1918. She was the founding director of the Boston Children's Museum, but before that, she was actually the director of the Fairbanks Museum up in Vermont. So she, had some real leadership in our field, which is I don't know how many females were actually museum directors back then, but she had a lot of things going on. So anyway, that was kind of cool. So shall we do our survey? You want to do our survey?
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to take a poll just to see where everyone's at in their conference experience so that we can tailor our discussion towards our audience.
Yeah. So there we go. The options, this is my first NEMA conference coming up, which assumes, of course, everybody's going to go to the conference. And then 2 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus. So if everybody can log in.
Are you going to vote, Dan?
No, I can't vote because I'm the presenter, so I don't even have that option. But you can.
I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to say that I don't know. I'd have to
do a count, but
I'm pretty sure I'm 10 plus. All right. Okay. Well,
vote. Do it. I mean, hey, and this is actually a good segue too. By the way, everyone remember that. Election Day is the day before the conference, so November 6th is when we need to vote, we need to get out there, and so we're reminding everybody that that's the day. Some people, though, are voting early. I know Meg voted early in our office, and Scarlett, I think, did too. She told me. So
I voted early. It was great.
Yeah?
I was like to get that out of the way.
It's sort of become a conference tradition for me to vote the day before, so... Okay, I'm going to end voting. It looks like almost everybody that is on has decided, and we're going to share the results. And maybe, can you see it? Can you see the results?
Can see it.
Okay, cool. So it looks like 53% of us are first conference, and then we've got a smattering of folks 2 to 5, 5 to 10, and so forth. So, okay.
Great.
Well, that's good.
That
So
makes sense.
you all that have been to more than one conference, make sure you chime in a little bit with some of your experiences. Marieke, do you remember your very first conference, your very first NEMA conference?
I've been trying to think about it, and I don't know my first NEMA conference, but I do remember one of my earliest NEMA conferences. And It's so funny when I think back. That was, I don't know, like 2002 or 3, let's say, probably 2003. And I think about the distinct difference between when I go to conference now and how I went and what it was like back then. I remember walking in, one, like stressing out over what to wear, like how is everyone going to dress like? Is it going to be formal or informal? Like, should I wear like the one suit I own because I'm very new to the museum field, I don't make any money? And I walked in there and I didn't know anybody, and it was such a weird feeling. And I remember that now because of the last conference last year. I can't walk down the hallway without seeing someone that I know. Right. And being very excited to see them, like because I haven't seen them for a year, or because I just met them, or we've had a conversation online. And It's in that time, let's say 15 years, it's grown from a very formal experience where I didn't know anybody to it being a giant family fest.
So what's changed? Has the conference changed, or have you changed?
I think I've changed. Every time I go to an event, especially a NEMA event, I meet more people, and I've met more people through my work, but I think it's the NEMA networking events, it's the conference, it's showing up, it's talking to people, sitting next to you. It over time, you just accumulate all these contacts and all these familiar faces, and it feels great.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I know from when we do polls, we do a post-conference survey every year, and we talk about, asking people what they get out of the conference, what do they enjoy the most, that type of thing. It actually, and typically, the big two, of course, is professional development, going to sessions, and then networking. And you find it that earlier on when you go to conferences, your motivation tends to be, at least you say this, that, it's the professional development, learning the skills and so forth. And later on, people really go to, sort of meet, old friends and network and all that kind of a thing. And even that, so networking, it's in a sense, it's when you have a bunch of years under your belt, it's not so much networking like I'm trying to get a job or whatever, but it's networking like just meeting friends and enjoying people's company and hearing their stories and stuff. I think, anyway, that's what happens to me.
I think especially if you work at a small place, you often feel alone. And going to the conference and seeing familiar faces, talking to other people in similar situations, which you wouldn't get if you went to a larger conference. Typically, you may meet someone at big organizations, but the little places, you can really benefit from the NEMA conference.
Yeah, well, that's very true on both counts of professional development and networking. I think when I was a museum director, at the Charles River Museum of Industry, I was like, I had, there was a staff of 1.5, and not even, I was part-time as well. But the ED does virtually everything. So I remember going to these NEMA conferences. It's sort of like, entering a Disney World or a department store. It's like, oh, okay, gee, I think I need to figure out what it means to be a curator. I think I need to figure out how to deal with the collection, whatever. And it became like, okay, I'm getting all these tools that I need to do the job, and it's fantastic for that. So, my experience. So, what do we want to talk about? We've got kind of a number of things that we want to cover with the conference, and y'all in the audience, let us know what it is that you want to hear in particular. But why don't we start off, Marieke, with just sort of kind of how do you deal with the conference as an individual? It can be very overwhelming. How do you take care of yourself? What are sort of the needs that you've got?
I think that for us, we wanted to talk about just the basic, like getting through the days as a person, because going to a conference can be taxing on your body. So there's just some straight up tips that you should know to just keep your strength up and your spirits up. So we're going to run through some of those ideas. And yes, please, if you have a hack, if you have an idea, write it in the comments. Basic number one, what are you going to wear to the conference? So there's many schools of thought on that. I think we can talk about your approach to that, Dan. My approach has always been be comfy. That's very important, especially on your feet, whatever's going on your feet. And NEMA conferences, I think, run the gamut of wardrobe. So I think if you wear whatever you want. It's the basic idea. But be comfy. Dress in layers, because it's always weird temperatures in rooms. They can go from super freezing cold to all of a sudden very, very hot. And you don't know what's going to happen. Also, NEMA conferences take place in November, and we've had all sorts of weather. We've had super nice days, and we've had freezing days, so you never know. I guess I tend to go towards business casual. I like to throw a blazer on, which is probably dressier than I am at work, but why not? It's a nice layer. And
I think over time, by the way, I think things have gotten a little more casual. I will note that. I mean, I've gotten more casual. You know, I do wear a suit from time to time, but, you know, I like last year at the Cape, you know, remember it was like a big deal. I didn't wear a tie for most of it, I think, you know, or whatever. But, you know, yeah, I mean, it's sort of also, I always counsel people to try to, you know, if you're in doubt, though, you really do want to understand that, you know, if you're there to get a job, if you're there to, you know, sort of, you know, trying to move up in the field or whatever, people are in fact looking at you, and it's part of your personal branding. So you want to give.
Dan, you cut out. Is anyone else? Dan, you cut out there for a second.
Uh-oh. Well,
did anything happen, or all right? We're just going to keep an eye on that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm still good. Okay, good. Maybe that was my the technological gods trying to cut me off. It's like the cane. You know,
well, see,
give me the hook.
Our audience needs to know that when we record our podcast, there is heavy editing that takes place.
Yeah.
So we're trying to self-edit ourselves right now, not get too rambly. Okay. Other important things. So if anyone has any questions about wardrobe, just toss them in the chat feature, and we can go into it further. But we have a lot to cover, so we don't want to ramble.
How about snacks? I'm always hungry.
Yes. I sometimes feel that we get overfed at conference, which is awesome, because they're often snack breaks, and those are wonderful. And so there's two schools of thought on that, right? If you go to snack break to network, you don't want to be shoving a muffin in your face.
Yeah, right.
So you can maybe have a snack later and focus on a cup of coffee and chatting and have your hands free.
Right.
So there's two schools of thought on that. It's got to be strategic. So always bring your own snacks and bring your own water. Bring your water bottle. You've got to stay hydrated. It's a hotel after all. Lots of talking.
Yeah.
NEMA does a great job of making sure there are enough restrooms for ladies.
Mm-hmm.
So stay hydrated.
That's true. We also, you know, I always tell people you got to pace yourself too, and this is kind of difficult sometimes because you know our conference I find is jam-packed. I mean, I go to a lot of conferences just to compare, and there are vast areas of time that are free time in some conferences, and that's great for networking and whatever. But you know, we tend to be like, okay, and this year's conference, actually, we have more sessions and events than we've ever had. We have more than 100 sessions and events, which is overwhelming. So you got to make some choices. You got to feel, you know, and I guess don't feel tempted to go to every single one. If you're starting to feel tired, you know, take a break and, you know, sort of kick back a little bit. We have a mindfulness. We have a mindfulness break on Thursday. Oh, sorry. You're over talking. Go ahead. You're over talking me.
I know.
That's all right.
We're not in the same room. I can't.
I know. This happens.
I can't follow your cues.
Yeah, this happens. Anyway, we're doing a first-time thing. We're doing a mindfulness break on Thursday. I think it's at 10:45 or something like that. So you can join me in a quiet little conference room, and we're gonna, you know, just chill out together. So that's one option too.
Nice. I would add. Maybe the last thing under this category is self-care, is to try to disengage from work if you can. You're going to be checking your phone. You're going to be reading your emails, but you do yourself the best if you just let everyone know you're going to be out of the office and unreachable.
Yeah. Put your away message on, for sure.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, well, do you want to talk about networking? Because that's one of the big things.
Let's do it.
Or do you want to talk about sessions?
whatever your slide is next, let's do.
Okay, well, we'll do networking. How's that? We put in
right.
some fancy slides. So, how do you feel about networking? You're an extrovert, right?
Yeah, I kind of love it.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. I'm an extrovert, but
well, let's say that we formed the Museum People podcast because we think people who work in museums are fascinating. So
right.
I think going to conferences it's just like an embarrassment of riches, and it's such an indulgence because every single person you meet is interesting. They work in an interesting place, and they themselves are interesting. So yeah, it's always just put your phone down and say hello.
We have another survey. I forgot about this. This will be kind of fun.
Oh.
Look at this. How comfortable are you all walking into a room of strangers? And the options are, no problem, it's my jam. I'm okay with it, but it's not my favorite thing. I'll do it if I have a wing person, and I totally freak out at the idea. So let's see where we are with that. I thought of you when I wrote that word, it's my jam. You say stuff like that, Marieke.
I love to say it's my jam.
It's my jam. Yeah, I learned that. I plagiarized. Okay.
So I just want to give a shout out to the comments. Thanks, Doug, for your ideas of cashews. Delicious.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And Liz says, networking, do it. If you're not an extrovert, challenge yourself. Love it.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, this whole introvert-extrovert thing, I mean, I call myself an extrovert, but that's a label because I'm very introverted in some ways, and I'll know this too. I know that my first conferences, not necessarily NEMA conferences, but, I was absolutely petrified. There is just so much that you've got to sort of get beyond, and I've emerged, I've changed as a person, and I think over time it is because what Liz was just saying, you got to just do it. I remember forcing myself to do it, so... Mm-hmm. All right, looks like we've got... Oh, sorry, I'm going to end the voting here. This is exciting. You want to see the drum roll? Here we go. And I'm going to share the results. Here we go. So it looks like most people with us, I'm okay with it, but it's not my favorite thing. So kind of in the middle there. And we have a couple of people that'll do it with a wing person, and I totally freak out. One person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, climb off the ledge person. It's not that bad.
Well, thank you for your honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, though, that I've found to be useful, check this out. There's a little diagram, how to work a room. Let me see if I can pull in here. And it's actually from this woman who's named Diane Darling. She's a networking coach. I didn't know there was such a thing, but there is. And I think, Meg, can you throw up the website that where you can get this thing? But it's really cool because even though you can't really read it, it's hard to read on the screen. She goes through sort of the sequence of if you know that you're going to be going to a conference or a meeting or something, here are some of the things that you can do to strategize. And so number one is don't go in cold. She actually preps a little bit, does some research on the people that she might want to meet there at the event, and then a little bit of traveling light. She gives a little tip. For going in with just not loaded down with stuff and what to wear. One of the best pieces of advice I got from this, and I do this to the very day, is if I'm wearing a blazer at a networking event, which I usually do, I keep my business cards in the left-hand blazer pocket, and so that's the outgoing pocket if I'm handing it to somebody, and I take incoming cards from other people and put them in my right-hand pocket, because it used to be that I'd end up like giving other people's business cards away to people introducing myself. So stuff like that. It's pretty good. Yeah, thanks, Meg. Good. Diane Darling. .com. What are some of your tips, Marieke?
Well, I think that these are all really wonderful tips, and we'll give people a chance to read through those. Go to the website after we're done. But I think as she touches on it, if you just smile and look people in the eye and don't have your phone out, that goes miles towards somebody feeling like they can approach you if they're also not screwed networking. But it also shows that you're open to receiving networking. And that is so important. Like, you can hang next to the coffee machine and smile, and people will be like, this is delicious. And people will be like, oh, she's going to talk to me. This is great. So feel free to do that. And I think we actually have a question here in the chat. Cassandra asks, what's the best way to approach it if you're not looking for a job? I think that's where people get mistaken about networking. It's not about getting a job. It's about meeting people. and talking to people. If you approach it that way, every single person at the conference, these are people you want to get to know, these are peers, these are colleagues, and you're here to meet them, and they're there to meet you. You both have the same intention.
It's about building relationships. That's the thing. And, it's like I always say, it's, when you go to, especially a national conference, the relationship might last as long as, that conversation that you had. You'll never see the person again. But sometimes those relationships develop into these, lifelong career-changing professional friendships when you meet somebody at a conference. And, that's important. I think I might have met you at a conference, Marieke. Maybe.
Who knows? That was ages ago.
Yeah. Well, Marieke,
one thing go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just wondering, do we want to actually start our interview with Jen, and we can continue talking about networking and so forth as we're talking with her. You want to do that?
Yes. You bring her in, and I was just going to say about name tags. Technically, you're supposed to have your name tag on your right shoulder, so that when people shake your right hand, they look and that's what first thing that they see. When we go to conference, there are also often name tags on lanyards. I immediately take my name tag off a lanyard and I clip it super close to my face so that people can read my name tag and look at my face and not feel weird that they're always looking down at my belly button.
Right.
Instead, they're looking at my face.
One of the things that's a good tip. One of the things that we did name tags though. Wait, hang on. You got me excited about name tags. No, we changed name tags. Make sure sometimes you go to a conference and you'll see people that have a blank. It's always flipped around to the side that's not with your name on it. It seems on those lanyards. But a couple of years ago we started doing double-sided. So no matter where you got it, your name is there. But it's one thing to just make sure if you're at a conference that has just one side, make sure you're not flipped around.
The problem with that is sometimes people will put tickets.
The what?
Sorry.
Yeah,
sometimes people put tickets inside their name tag and then they cover up the opposite. So everyone just be mindful of that. Anyway, let's talk to Jen. Hey, Jen.
Jennifer Duckett.
Hello. Hi, Marieke. Hi, Dan.
Jen is the coordinator of school partnerships and teacher programs at the MFA in Boston, and she is also one of our esteemed PAG chairs for the Young and Emerging Professionals Professional Affinity Group. Jen, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I feel like a mini celebrity. I love museum people.
So last year at last year's NEMA conference was your very first NEMA conference, right?
Yes, that was my very first NEMA conference. It was really great.
Yeah. What was it like? Yeah.
It was wonderful. I had previously, as you said, I'm a young and emerging professional, so I've been to a few conferences, but not as many as some people. And the conferences I had been to prior had been big national conferences like AAM. And so coming to NEMA was really like a pleasant surprise for me because the other conferences I had been to had been so large and so big that you felt like it was hard to meet anyone. And at NEMA, kind of what you both were talking about earlier with networking, I found it actually surprisingly easy to meet people. And even though I'm newer to the field, I've been in the field probably less than 5 years at this point, I recognized a lot of people, even if I didn't know their names. And so there just felt like there was this nice local vibe to it because there were people from all over New England, so automatically there's something to talk about. You're all from a similar area. And people were just really ready to talk about whatever they were doing. On my first day, I had no plans for lunch because I had gone alone. I didn't really have any colleagues I knew well who were coming because I'm from this big institution. And I was just waiting in line at like the restaurant in the hotel. And the person in front of me turned around and was like, "I'm alone too. Do you want to get lunch?" I was like, "Sure, of course." And then two people behind us joined in as well. It was so nice and so everyone was so personable. It was a very pleasant surprise.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great tip for networking, by the way. In lunch lines and if you're standing in line for a bar, if you're after hours events, that's the best place to just chat up people. Hey, where are you from? That type of thing. Any surprises?
If you talk to one person, they're going to invite you to meet another person, and that's how networking works. Yeah.
Any surprises, Jen, from your first year NEMA conference?
I think I would say, well, first of all, I was surprised by just how friendly people were. It was really lovely. I guess I was expecting kind of a more intimidating environment. But I was also surprised by how many sessions were really applicable to my work. Like I said, I'd been to some more national conferences where you can be, the sessions sound wonderful, but when you actually go to them, you're like, oh, that's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. And I found most of the sessions I went to at NEMA last year really, really applicable to my work, and I left with some great tips and tricks to apply once I got back to my desk. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Let's talk about sessions. How did you decide what to go to?
Well, you guys mentioned the app earlier, and I found that super, super useful. I think I'd actually gone through ahead of time just through the PDF that's available on the website, but having the app there to actually organize what I was going to do at what time, and it will remind you what you're going to do, was really wonderful. I also always chose 2 sessions for a certain time slot in case I went to one and it wasn't what I was looking for. After 5 minutes, I could flip out and go to the other one that was kind of my backup, and that helped me once or twice. So I think that's kind of how I did it, but because I'm a museum educator, I went to mostly museum education sessions. There's a lot of options. So I tried not to only stick to museum education and kind of get outside my comfort zone a little bit. But the other thing I did was really make sure I didn't go to only lectures. I think, for me at least, the most useful sessions I've been to have been more roundtable discussions, or maybe there's a few speakers or a panel, but then you also have time to ask questions or talk to the people around the table with you, because I feel like often connecting with colleagues, especially when you're an emerging professional or maybe you haven't been in the field as long, can be really, really useful to get their insights and perspectives as well.
Yeah. What was your biggest challenge going into the conference last year? Was there we were talking about networking. I don't know, you seem to be kind of an extroverted person, but, was just that whole business of meeting people, was that a challenge, or taking care of yourself?
Yeah, I think both of those things. I am definitely an extrovert, but I didn't plan to come with anyone. So I knew what I didn't do last year, and I will do this year, is actually look on the app ahead of time to see who's coming. So I didn't know which of my friends from grad school were coming, or if any colleagues from the MFA were coming until I was already here. Which was not smart on my end. But so I kind of showed up like, yeah, who am I going to get lunch with? Yeah, where am I going for dinner tonight? And I was lucky enough to be able to grab people and kind of tag along to a lot of things, which was really fun for me. But it was also a challenge to make sure that, like you were talking about earlier with self-care, that I wasn't totally burnt out by the end of the week, because it's a lot of talking to people and a lot of coffee. And there was one night I was just like, you know what, I'm going to take myself out to dinner and just be quiet and read a book. And it was really great. And I think making sure you don't overload yourself with too many sessions and too much networking can be a challenge, because that's what you're there for, right?
Hey, this might be a good time for a commercial for the pre-conference get-to-know-you session. What are we calling it? The newcomers session?
I think it's a preview or something.
Conference preview, that's right, which is at, let's see, what time is it? I'm actually looking at the program. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Conference preview session. Jen, you're going to be there, right? Talk to people about
Yes, I will be there.
So anybody that's new to the conference, if you want to grab some coffee and come on over and talk to Jen and some of her colleagues. One of the ideas that I know we were talking about in the office, though, is we want to encourage everybody that shows up at that particular session to maybe see whether they want to create a little cohort and go into some of these networking events and so forth together, just because it's more comfortable for folks. So we might try to do that this year.
Meg is telling us that we should also look at the bulletin board near walk-in registration, because sometimes people are looking for a buddy, and you can get one there.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and free lunch tickets sometimes, which is really useful if you did not plan lunches like me.
Good tip.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Okay, so from what I heard from Jen is that you need to do a little bit of advanced planning for the conference, but also be flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that sweet spot in between that I think can be difficult to achieve sometimes, but if you stay flexible enough, the conference can be really incredible.
Jen,
we
you
talked
mentioned
about sessions. Sorry, we have two people who like to ask questions.
Yes.
And we probably didn't hear all day. I wanted to wrap up about the sessions because I think you touched on having a backup, but how do you feel and how do others feel? Does it make you nervous when you think about exiting a session that you're totally not into? Because I think people stay in sessions because they don't want to be that guy who walked out, but how does everybody feel about that? I can say as a presenter, when people leave, I'm not going to call you out on it, and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And I just want you to know that. And I don't think any of the presenters are going to fault you for leaving. So comments, thoughts?
I think from my end, people definitely, because this was my first conference, people definitely, and some presenters actually said this, feel free to leave if this session is not for you. Sometimes the descriptions we read, they have to be so short because they need to fit in the program that you don't always know exactly what you're getting into. And sometimes there's two amazing sessions going on at the same time, and you want to catch a little bit of both. So I think most people are pretty understanding. I have seen, so I usually always get a seat in these sessions because, I mean, who doesn't like to sit down? But I have seen people very sneakily kind of stand on the edges, probably because they're maybe deciding between two and haven't quite decided yet. And especially if it's a full room, sometimes people need to stand, and then slip out, and I didn't even notice. And I don't think presenters noticed either. So I feel like if you're really on the edge, maybe not, sitting in the front row is probably a good idea, and maybe sitting closer to the door so that you don't make a big fuss when you're leaving.
I totally agree, except for when the room has a squeaky door, and then you're in trouble.
Yeah. I think be as tactful and polite as possible, but you're also there to you've paid to come, or your museum is paying to come, and you're trying to get the most out of it that you can.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree too. I am that person in the back of the room usually, and I look at it as sort of like when you read a book and you're a chapter into it and you realize this thing is a dog. I got to get rid of the thing. You just stop reading it, and your time is worth something. And so I totally agree. Go find something better to do instead of sitting through a boring session. So. Okay. Oh, and Marieke, you said something about phones, and I guess what's your take on actually using your phone or a device in sessions?
I guess when I walk into a session and I sit down and before it starts, I want to talk to the person next to me and get to know them, because when we talk about networking, one way to make it less stressful is knowing that you can sit down before a session starts and talk to a person for probably 5 minutes. And don't worry that you're going to run out of things to say, because the session is going to start. So it's a really great time to talk to people. It's hard when I sit down and someone is just on their phones, look at email and stuff, and I want to talk to them. Maybe they don't want to talk to me. Sure, I get that. But if you don't use your phone as a crutch, if you're feeling uncomfortable, try to talk to people. Put your phone away. I know some people are actively tweeting or looking up conference sessions or that sort of thing, and feel free to do that, but also think that maybe you're not sending a networking I'm open message if you're on your phone.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what about other things, laptops, tablets? I mean, people, you take notes on those things, but there is kind of the risk that you're fooling around too, I guess, or you get sucked into the internet or emails.
Yeah, I think classic networking issue. I'm sure you've all talked to someone and you've met them at a thing, and you're looking at them and they're looking past you and looking behind you and scanning the room, and doesn't that just drive you insane? When we don't have someone's attention when they're talking to us, it's rude, and you don't want to be that person. So if you're on your phone and you're talking to someone, just move your phone away or move your laptop or something to show that you are engaged with the other person. I think it's just classic politeness.
Right, totally. So, have we talked about sessions enough? What else did we want to say? Oh, well, the other thing is we are always, by the way, this is a commercial for future conferences. The basics of the basis of a conference is the presenters, and the presenters are you guys, everybody that goes to conferences, and especially those folks that are younger professionals. You haven't been to a conference or whatever. Try to get some inspiration when you're there to be thinking about contributing a session proposal of your own or participating on a panel or whatever in future years, because ultimately, I hear this all the time, especially from young professionals. Oh, gee, what do I know? I have nothing to add to the conversation or whatever. And I say, forget it. You've got a lot of experiences that are potentially very valuable to people, and go ahead and throw in a session proposal, because that's so important. And when you're at a conference, you get some inspiration. Perhaps you also meet people that maybe have common interests, and you can join together and create a panel yourself. So anyway, use that as an opportunity when you're at the conference to be thinking about how am I going to, basically contribute and help my own career and so forth by speaking in the future. Yeah.
Excellent. I think we should also mention that if you go to a session and it's full, et cetera, or you leave it, NEMA puts all of our session handouts online if the speakers upload them. So feel free to be comforted by the fact that a lot of those resources will be available after the conference.
Right, absolutely. Jen, question for you. At the MFA, how do you actually go about getting permission to attend conferences? Do you have to, is there like a budget that, is first come, first serve, or do you, have to sort of make the case to your supervisor? How's that work?
Oh, Dan, I wish I knew exactly what the protocol was. It's kind of like if there's a professional development opportunity, you can make the case for it. And for me, I can actually only go one day this year, partly because we have this huge event with a partner that I have to coordinate the next day on November 8th. So I'm going to go rush there and rush back, basically. But I had to make the case that it was worth it for me to go for one day, especially because it's not that close to Boston. But I think, honestly, having the materials ahead of time, the fact that we have the program ahead of time is helpful, because you can see how applicable the conference sessions are to the work that we're doing, and though I feel it's very applicable to the work that I do at the MFA. And I think the fact that it is a local conference versus going to a huge like an AAM or an NAEA, the fact that it's local can be really beneficial when you're trying to convince colleagues, because these people are your neighbors in a lot of ways, and it can be really useful to be aware of what's going on in the field, specifically in New England, because that's the region that we're in. And so I feel like that was pretty useful. There's also ways to do it cheaply. Especially if you're a young professional. I feel like there's not always as much money in the budget for your professional development. So I was able to do it really cheaply, and I'm staying with my college best friend's parents that night instead of doing a hotel, which will be very interesting. We'll see how that goes. And I think there's NEMA can, when you sign up, NEMA can figure out a way for you to share a ride with somebody so that you're perhaps not paying for all the mileage, as well as volunteer opportunities to help curb the cost. So I feel like NEMA, and I also was lucky enough to get a scholarship last year to come. So I feel like NEMA really provides you with a lot of ways to kind of curb those costs if you're able. So for me, it wasn't very hard to convince them that this was a valuable use of my time and our budget.
Yeah, that's cool.
You can also volunteer for NEMA, as Heather reminds us.
Yeah, our office right now has 3 volunteers that are stuffing envelopes with tickets and so forth. So, yeah,
and
it's
for NEMA volunteers.
Her heroes.
Yeah, and it is a terrific way to get to conference. I think if you work for one, I forget the formula, but it's pretty generous. You work one shift as a volunteer at the conference, and you get that whole day paid for it. If you work 3 shifts, you get your whole conference paid for, or something like that. So it's pretty generous how you do it. Okay. Oh, you know what I wanted to figure out? So I'm interested in terms of Marieke. This might apply to you maybe more than anybody, but have you ever actually found a job or gotten a job through attending a conference?
Have I? Well, I think sometimes it's not as linear as that, right? It's you meet someone, and then something, that's how networks work. Someone, they can give you advice to help you get the next thing, etc. I guess that's, my own personal philosophy of being open to the universe. It's like always just showing up and saying yes and having a growth mindset. I can think of, there was one year I was on a bus to an event, because, you take buses to these, after hours events. And I sat down next to someone, we got to talking, and then next year we were on a panel together. So it's direct correlation between having a conversation with someone and some action taking place, and now we're friends. And it's really
bus buddies are the best things, I tell you, because it's usually it's sometimes you're on a bus for a half an hour or something with folks, and you really get a chance to get to know them. Hey, you probably know this, maybe you don't, I don't know, but I got my current job as NEMA director at a NEMA conference. I mean, it led to it anyway. I'll never forget. I was not really looking for a job, but I heard that Kate, my predecessor, was moving on, and they were actually deep in the search process. And I remember going up to Gail Kohlglazer, who was the president at that time. I said, "Is the search still open? I might be interested in this." And she said, "Sure." So it was crazy, but yes, it was at the conference that led to this job that I've got. So there you go. Jen, do you have any thought? I mean, you can't say, am I looking for a job, obviously, because nobody, it's always
well, I will say I did go to, I did get a new job since I went last year. I was in a different position at the MFA and then switched around January, but I went to this really great, it was a resume writing workshop, I believe. So everybody there was either looking for a job, or you were like me and you were just like, I'm not looking, but this seems like a good opportunity. And so everyone there, it was a panel discussion of people on HR or directors of museums, and they were very brutally honest about what they are looking for. And I think there's usually, some kind of session that is helpful if you're looking for a job. And that was super useful to me, because even though I wasn't looking for a job in that moment, a month later, this job opened up at the MFA, and I was like, oh, thank God I went to that. And I actually got to give I think I gave my resume to Dawn Salerno, actually, and she edited it for me and gave it back. Everybody had that option who went to that session, and it was really incredible opportunity, and like something you don't get at bigger conferences. And it was also useful to hear all the success stories, but also horror stories from other people in the room, and it was like a little circle of safety in the conference, and it was really, really lovely and helped me get my job that I have now.
Yeah, that's cool. How about mentors? That's the kind of thing, Marieke, you sort of mentioned, that the bus buddies and the, maybe moving, not a job offer right there at the conference, obviously, but, meeting people that are able to connect you. Do you have a particular strategy for thinking about, okay, this person can maybe help me in my career, that type of thing?
Whenever I meet anybody, I think, how is this person going to make me a better person, to make me a better museum person? Like, that should just be your approach to networking. If you come into a networking event thinking, I want this person to help me get a better job, people can see through that.
Yeah.
I would recommend
they can smell your desperation.
Yeah, I would say be your genuine self, and that's just life advice, and be honest and want to get to know other people and be open to that. And that's what I think people really respect. That's what people want in an employee, in a coworker, and in a mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah. I remember as I would prep for these conferences, I would be actually thinking about what problems do I want to solve. Like when I was a museum director, like what are the things that I would like to see if somebody can help answer this question or provide some perspective on. And then I would actually either reach out to that person or just be aware of people that are speaking and whatever, that they might be able to, throw some words of wisdom on things. I mean, I'll never forget. I mean, Larry Yurden was, I met him early. He's the president of Strawberry Bank and going to receive our Lifetime Achievement Award this year. And I remember going to him at my first NEMA conference as a director, and I remember him being very helpful answering a couple of, he probably rolled his eyes and thought, what a, dope, why doesn't he know this? But he was very gracious about it. And I thought, that, and he has helped me many times. Nina Zaneri is another person, but I remember kind of going into it with, gee, I have this issue that I need to sort of figure out. Do you do that?
I think it's so, the one beautiful thing about, many beautiful things about the NEMA conference is that all these leaders are very accessible. And if you have a question, go up and ask the president of whatever. People are so generous and just want to engage with you. So even if you're a young and emerging professional, don't be afraid of that. Ask those questions. Also, I think something that Jen touched on is like she goes to some sessions, right, Jen, that you are good for you professionally, but it's also nice to just go to something else and learn something different, right? Danny mentions that.
Yeah.
Because you never know. Like someday you're going to need to know something about that, and you're like, I think I went to a NEMA session a couple of years ago about that. You're going to look through your notes. You're going to find his name. That's how that comes about. You can answer questions years later. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not seeing too many questions from our audience here. Here's your chance to sort of throw in any burning questions that you might have about the conference or what you want to do. So we've got a couple of minutes left for that, so I'm encouraging you to do that.
Jen, were you nervous when you went to your first conference?
To NEMA specifically? Yeah, because I didn't really, like I said, I hadn't planned lunches out, and even though I'm an extrovert, like nobody likes to stand in a room where they don't know anyone and there's tons of people milling around. So I was a little nervous, but I think, like I said, because it's such a warm, almost like familial environment, and people are so willing to give you some advice or just talk to you for a little bit, it like once I was there after 15 minutes, I was like, oh, this is great. This is going to be a great 3 days. And it turned out being wonderful. I ended up even meeting people from my own museum who I had never met, which is kind of crazy, but when you work in a museum as large as the MFA, it totally happens. So it can be great to network with other people, but also just like see people you do know or you know in passing, but haven't gotten to know very well in more of an informal setting outside of work.
Yeah.
Right on. So you're going to roll into this year like, I own this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And have cowboy hat on, the whole thing.
So a couple of resources that might be helpful to folks that are newcomers especially is we have conference ambassadors, and so you should keep your eyes out for those folks. Everybody on the NEMA board automatically becomes an ambassador. They have these little yellow buttons, and we have a whole bunch of PAG chairs and folks that are board alums and whatever. So if you see somebody wearing a little yellow button that says ambassador on it, you can approach them for sure in a very comfortable way, and ask them either questions about the conference, because they'll presumably know something about where to go and that kind of thing, but also approach them with even just questions you might have in terms of meeting people and that type of thing, because I'm sure they're going to be able to help you out. There's also a newcomer's handbook on the NEMA website under the conference section, so you might want to check that out as well. It's got some tips and so forth that Scarlett in our office put together and the NEMA staff, so that's something to think about as well in terms of the things that might help you out. Oh, and newcomers reception, that's the other thing. If you guys want a free drink, make sure that you have either signed up for the newcomers reception, which is, when is that? Is that Wednesday or Thursday? I forget. It's Monday. I'm sorry, Monday. Wednesday, the first day of conference, 5:30 p.m. And I think we've got, all newcomers get a drink ticket, so if you haven't signed up, I think you can go see Meg, and we've got a few extra around for that. But that's a good way to meet folks as well.
So Cassandra has a question. If there's a relevant session that you can't attend, are the session leaders usually willing to talk with you about the content of their session? I can't speak for all session leaders, but if you see someone and they're wearing a speaker tag, the best way to break the ice is to say, oh, what was your session about, or did you already talk? And people will absolutely tell you about themselves and all the interesting things that they know. So it's a great icebreaker, and definitely ask people questions.
That's a great thing about the app too that you might be able to use is that if you had to miss it, and you don't know even what the person looks like, to be able to walk up to them, you can actually reach out via the app and ask your question or see if you can do a meetup or something like that. And as Marieke says, most times people that have presented just absolutely love talking about their topics. So having a one something that they're usually amenable to doing.
So maybe we should talk about what happens after the session is over and you're back at work.
Oh boy, yeah. Isn't that there's got to be a name phenomenon, but you're all pumped up and charged up, and I'm going to change the world. You come back from a conference, and then you've got the world intervenes. It's not Stockholm syndrome, is it?
Anyway, Jen, what was your strategy after you came back from conference last year?
I think it's really good to try after whatever session you're in, especially if it's very applicable to what you do and it's not just like for fun, to think of while you're still there in the session, to think of some action steps, because I think the biggest challenge with professional development is just what Dan just described, coming back to your desk and being like, oh, I was out for 3 days and I have a million things on my to-do list, and like I'll get to that later, I'll look at my notes later, and you never do. And I think for me, what was really useful last year, there was one session in particular where there was actually time built in to, like reflection time built into the session, where they asked you to think, like, yes, we've been talking about all these other institutions, but like think about your institution now and what your role is and how you might implement some of these things, or how does this apply to what you do in your everyday job? What are small things or big things that you want to do when you get back? And that session especially was the one where when I got back to my desk, I had already written down those steps, and just having done that prep work already made it a million times easier to think about. I think I was thinking about my internship program for that summer and small changes I wanted to make, and that was incredibly valuable. But I think as soon as you get back, you drive back or you fly back or whatever from a conference, it becomes that much harder once you're not there anymore to think about those action steps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you do with all the business?
Pop.
What do you do with all the business cards that you collect at a conference?
I have a little bulletin board by my desk where I have a huge, bunch of business cards pinned. But I think a lot of people, and what I've done is connect to people via LinkedIn and send a quick message about how nice it was to meet them, and also a specific thing, like it was nice to meet you at the newcomer reception or at this session, so that they remember who the heck you are. And also, there's something really specific you had talked about, you can send them an email that following up saying, I'd love to talk about this more. Or for me, because I'm a YEP, I was thinking about new sessions and YEP PAG events that we wanted to do, and some of those came out of that conference. So I think following up in a little way or through an email can be really, really useful.
Yeah. Marieke, what do you do with business cards?
I connect with everyone on LinkedIn on Monday, and then I recycle.
Yeah, I tend to try to not with everybody, but those that I've had meaningful conversations with, there's some follow up or whatever, or you just say it was great to meet you, kind of a thing. But the follow up is imperative, and sometimes you get into the mode at conference, you're over promising. Oh yeah, let's go out for coffee next week, or whatever. But if you actually if you suggest it, you really should be thinking about following through with whatever it is, because people really do end up remembering. So don't get lost in the weeds.
So I think we just have a couple of minutes left. If anyone has any lingering questions, or if it would be really great to hear, one tip that you took away from this, just so we can all see and think about the main points. We don't want to lose that. As Jen says, let's reflect in the moment.
Yeah.
And any last minute advice, Jen? Anything that we didn't cover?
Yeah. What would you advise to newcomers yourself? Yeah. Like the you of a year ago. What would you want to do?
I think just don't be it's hard not to be shy if you're naturally shy, but like feel free to, talk to the person right next to you in line or the person sitting next to you at a session. I think nobody comes into the conference with like the reality TV mindset of like, I'm not here to make friends. I don't think I met anybody with that mindset when I was there. And even if people are intimidating, like Marieke said, some people are looking at their phones. They send kind of unconscious signals. Most people are there excited to talk about what they do and excited to meet other people and connect. That's like the whole reason for going to a conference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Well, any last thoughts? I guess it's a wrap.
It's going to be an amazing conference.
Yeah, it is. I'm pumped. I mean, I've been pumped for a year. I'm glad we're getting it done. It's going to happen. So, well, Marieke, I think that's the end of it here. Jen, it's so great to talk with you. Thank you so much for your advice and your participation and leadership, of course, in NEMA. And Marieke, always great to talk with you. Any last shots, parting shots, last thoughts?
Always a pleasure, and thank you to everyone for your support of NEMA. I look forward to thanking you in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I hope to see you as well, and happy Halloween.
Right. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.